The New Brunswick Association of Dietitians Continuing Competence Program. The New Brunswick Association of Dietitians, or NBAD, was established by the Dietitians Act, which gives it the responsibility to protect the public by regulating the profession of dietetics. NBAD ensures public protection by setting standards for education, training, and qualification, and registering those who meet the standards, setting mandatory continuing competence requirements, and investigating and addressing complaints about dietitians. You may have noticed that often the terms continuing education and continuing competence are used interchangeably. But is there a difference? Professional competence is defined as having the minimum knowledge, skills, and judgment to practice the profession safely. So engaging in continuing education can help you to stay informed about new developments in nutrition and dietetics, or develop or maintain skills relevant to the profession. Continuing competence activities involve identifying gaps in your dietetic knowledge or skills, engaging in learning activities that focus on one or more of those gaps, and then evaluating what you learned to determine if and how it may impact your dietetic skills and judgment. With that in mind, NBAD's Continuing Competence Program, or CCP, consists of 4 steps completed over the course of the year. In step 1, you'll evaluate your own practice and identify areas for improvement. Using the results of the self-assessment, you'll create 2 learning goals. The learning goals will identify what you want to learn, along with the activities that you'll complete to achieve the goal. Step 3 takes place throughout the next year as you complete learning activities to achieve your learning goals. In step 4, you'll evaluate the impact of the learning activities. Let's take a closer look at each of the steps. In the first step, you'll reflect on your current knowledge and skills to identify learning goals. To complete the self-assessment, you'll want to consider things like, what areas of dietetic practice do I currently work, volunteer, or have interest in? Does my dietetic practice involve specialized areas of knowledge or skills, or high-risk activities? If so, are there any guiding documents, like clinical practice guidelines or competency documents? What trends or factors are affecting my current dietetic practice, or could affect my practice in the future? What knowledge or skills do I need to stay current in these areas of practice? The CCP workbook includes a self-assessment tool. The online CCP submission requires you to indicate the competency and performance indicator being addressed by your learning goal. Use the self-assessment tool to identify which competencies or performance indicators will be improved as a result of your planned learning activities and learning goals. Using the results of your self-assessment, in step 2, you'll develop 2 SMART learning goals to be achieved over the next year. A learning goal is SMART if it is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and relevant, and timely. The CCP workbook and online form includes 6 questions. Answering these 6 questions will help make sure that your learning goals include all the elements of a SMART goal. Let's look at an example. You might create a learning goal that says, I want to mentor dietetic interns. This is not a good learning goal because it's not specific or measurable. It describes an activity or task and not what will be learned. It's also very broad. There are many aspects to mentoring dietetic interns. Consider what skills you would need to learn or improve in order to mentor interns. Using the SMART principles, you might rewrite the learning goal to say, I will improve my active listening skills so that I can enhance my communication with dietetic interns. I will complete 2 webinars on active listening and review a workbook from the internship program. I will use feedback from dietetic interns to ensure continuous improvement by July 31st. This is a better learning goal because it's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and relevant to dietetic practice, and timely. Step 3 takes place after the renewal period. You'll keep a log of the learning activities that you complete to address your learning goals throughout the year. Learning activities must be completed during the CCP year from April 1st to March 31st. Remember that March is a transition month. Learning activities completed in March can be used to address learning goals from the current CCP year, ending March 31st, or for next year's learning goals. The CCP workbook provides space for you to record all the learning activities that you complete during the year, even ones that aren't related to one of your 2 learning goals. If things change during the year and you're unable to complete one of your learning goals, you can use this record to identify an alternative learning goal that you've completed. Make sure you keep supporting documents for all of your learning activities. NBAD audits 20% of CCP submissions each year. If you're selected to participate in the audit, you'll provide the supporting documents to the Quality Assurance Committee for review. Members of the committee will review the supporting documents to confirm that you completed the activity, and the content of each learning activity will be evaluated to ensure it's related to your learning goal and that it contributed significantly to your knowledge and competence as a dietitian. Keep supporting documents for a minimum of 5 years. The last step in the CCP program is self-reflection. After you've completed all the learning activities, you'll reflect on what you learned and how that learning impacted both your practice and your competence as a dietitian. Describe the new knowledge and skills you acquired. How did the learning impact your dietetic practice or competence as a dietitian? And then the process begins again. The CCP cycle runs from April 1st to March 31st to coincide with the annual renewal. Steps 1, 2, and 4 are completed in March, and step 3 is completed throughout the year. The first step of your annual renewal in March is to complete step 4 by doing the self-reflection of last year's learning. Once you've submitted your CCP form for the past year, you'll complete the self-assessment and enter 2 new learning goals into next year's CCP form. The form will stay open throughout the next year so you can record learning activities and begin your self-assessment. Let's take a look at some of the common mistakes that people make when creating learning goals or choosing learning activities. A common mistake is creating a goal that's not specific. For example, I will enhance my knowledge of diabetes. This goal is too broad and not achievable. Choose a more specific topic or area of diabetes, like treating hypoglycemia or adjusting insulin. Believe it or not, one of the most common errors that the Quality Assurance Committee sees is learning goals that don't actually identify any learning. For example, I will develop a policy on nutrition screening, or I will create a PowerPoint presentation on food safety. These are not learning goals. They're tasks or projects that are part of your job. If you've identified a new project or task that you need to accomplish during the coming year, you can turn it into a learning goal. Think about what new knowledge or skills you need to complete this project or task and create a learning goal to address that need. Looking at the first example, what specifically do you need to learn in order to develop a new policy on nutrition screening? Do you need to learn more about current best practices related to nutrition screening for your particular client population? Or is it the specific technology that you'll be using to screen your clients? Perhaps your biggest challenge will be helping existing employees manage the change that will come with the implementation of the nutrition screening process. A learning goal related to current best practices could be written as, I will improve my knowledge about best practices in nutrition screening for seniors in long-term care settings. I will do this by completing DC's online course on nutrition screening and by reviewing journal articles and consulting with colleagues in long-term care. I will use this learning to develop a nutrition screening policy for my organization by October 30th. Sometimes dietitians confuse personal goals with learning goals. For example, I want to get a job in public health, or I want to pass the Canadian Dietetic Registration Examination, or CDRE. Turn these into learning goals by identifying something that you will learn to help you pass the CDRE or to get a job in public health. I will improve my skills in developing and pursuing a learning plan to help me prepare for and pass the November CDRE. I will achieve this goal by reviewing the CDRE preparation guide, the integrated competencies for dietetic education and practice, and by participating in a study group with some of my peers. Goals that are not related to dietetic practice cannot be turned into learning goals. For example, I want to increase my knowledge of yoga. Knowledge of yoga does not improve your competency as a dietitian. Another common mistake is in the choice of learning activities. Remember that the purpose of the CCP is to help you maintain your competence as a dietitian. Consider the source and content of learning resources and whether they'll help you to develop or maintain the depth of knowledge required to maintain your dietetic competence. There are some instances where using resources designed for the general public may be appropriate learning activities for achieving your learning goal. For example, a dietitian whose learning goal is to improve her cultural competence by learning about Indigenous foods and culture may choose learning activities involving resources designed for the general public. As a general rule, however, you should pause before using learning resources developed by people without appropriate expertise or that are not clearly evidence-based. Even when the resource comes from a reliable source, it may not be a good learning activity if it provides basic nutrition information for general audiences. Now that you know about the elements of SMART goals, you're ready to create learning goals for next year.